He didn't make this trip, so.
Now it's getting easy for me. I'm done with my responsibilities. I'm going to introduce our speaker and the auction's Nick and Stephanie problems, so I get to start partying now. But our keynote this year, Robert Gipe, he hardly know him. I heard him at the National Rural Assembly in Washington, D.C. in September, and he was one of 4 people on a panel, and they were talking about rural life and our need for our rural communities and rural social responsibility, and I liked what I heard. And so afterwards I contacted him and said, what would it take to coerce you to come out to Kansas and visit with us at our convention and be our keynote speaker? And he goes, well, I've never done any public speaking. Well, you should. and he said, well, I've never been to Kansas. And I said, well, we're not that bad up there. You gotta come and visit us. And I figured out he could be lured out here cheaply. So you know, we ain't got nothing to lose. If he has stage fright, can't do it, it's like we just make fun of his Kentucky accent. And I think that we'll probably enjoy him. I kind of had my thought of him when I was hearing him at the panel was he was kind of the Garrison Keeler of the Appalachians. And so he has wonderful stories about his rural community and coal life in Kentucky. And I'm building you up pretty high. You know, our previous speakers have been like Jim Hightower, National Farmers Union presidents, and so you've got a high torch to carry here, young man. So, Robert Gipe. I should have said something. I think you teach theater at a junior college in Kentucky. Is that something right?
I got it from here, man.
Oh, okay.
You've done enough.
Yeah, that's not helpful.
Thanks, Don. Really had a nice time being here today and hanging out with y'all and listening to what y'all do when you get together. I come from a part of Kentucky that doesn't, well, we've got agriculture, but it's highly regulated, where it's illegal because it's mostly marijuana. And so, but I don't come from an agricultural part of Kentucky. I come from the far southeastern part of Kentucky. And so I drove out here. One, because I didn't know what I was going to say, so I didn't want to be in any big hurry to get here. And 2, I figured that'd present a lot of opportunities for me to get my car stolen or get lost. But it's hard to get lost out here. Everything's just a straight line. You get your GPS going. It says your turn's in a half a mile. You look out there and you can see where you're fixing to turn. Because where I'm from, the roads are all curvy, right? It's like I heard a man say one time, he said, you can run your battery down blowing your horn at your own taillights. I tell you what though, back after the Civil War, you know, Kentucky was a slave state. But in eastern Kentucky, there wasn't any kind of plantation life, right? So everybody had little small farms. This was before coal mining came in, because coal mining came in with the railroad. So then after the war, during the war, where we were on the border with Tennessee and Virginia, there was a lot of back and forth, right? I mean, it was very contested ground, and one of the things that happened was that if you had some beef with your neighbor, well, you just figure out what side they were on, and you take up with the other side, and then you could just shoot under the guise of it being the Civil War, right? So then after the war was over, they think this is part of the root of all what they talk about the feuds in Kentucky. So in Harlan County, where I live now, the main 2 outfits that was fighting was the Turner family and the Howard family. And so then whenever one of them would kill too many, the other one, they'd have to kind of take it on the lam. They'd come out this way. And so I teach Appalachian history at the community college where I work. And so there was always some dude that killed a bunch of people in Kentucky. He'd sneak out here to Missouri, and they'd catch him in a dress somewhere on a train trying to pass for a woman. So that's what I thought was out here, right? A bunch of Kentucky outlaws cross-dressing. But that's Missouri. We're in Kansas now. People I'm from Kansas, but you know why? It's because now whenever you do anything, you got to do it online, so you have to do those pull-down menus when you're doing your address, and Kansas is right above Kentucky, and I'll be damned. Half my mail comes to my house saying I'm from Kansas, but I click on the wrong thing, so it's giving me a certain sympathy with y'all.
You could become a member.
I got me a medallion. One of the medallions in case this didn't go well, because I thought, at least I got me a medallion. Well, like I said, so where I come from is coal mining country, right? Or it was, right? 10 million tons coal in the first years of this century come out of Harlan County every year. 10 million tons. Of course, the story in our county, as it is in most of the coal fields, is that even though production has stayed high, employment has gone down, like a lot of things, right? It's like, I think that may be something that goes on here. Production stays up, but employment goes down in the dominant thing. And of course, in our county, about 75% of the land is owned by people who don't live in the county. Right? Corporate interests from the Northeast and such came down when the railroad got built and bought up the land, bought up the right to the mineral. And so then the people worked in the mines or they left. But then, since the 30s anyway, with mechanization of the mines, employment has steadily gone down. And of course, my county, if any of y'all have heard of it, you've probably heard of it because in 1974 there was a mine strike by the United Mine Workers of America against the Brookside Coal Company that ended up being in a documentary called Harlan County, USA, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary that year. So there'd been a strong UMWA presence there, but that had mostly faded by the end of the 80s. And so, as employment went down, we became one of the roughest, poorest places in the country. And I remember when I first, because I grew up in East Tennessee, so I'm a Tennessean, which I think may serve about the role Missouri serves for y'all. I remember when I moved to Kentucky, they said, you know why birds fly upside down over Tennessee? And I said, no. Why? And they said, because there ain't nothing worth pooping on in Tennessee. All right. So, but I've been in Kentucky over half my life now, and it's a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place to live. And one of the things that's happened, though, I've been teaching at the community college there for 18 years. I worked at an arts organization before that. And about 2001. The dominant story, our region's role in the national media there was coal mining is a dangerous business. It's a very physically demanding business. And poverty is hard on people too. And so we had a shortage of health care and an abundance of medicine. And so OxyContin and other prescription opioids hit our community very, very hard. And we're a very family-oriented community. People took care of their own business mostly. And so when these prescription narcotics came in or were being prescribed to people who got hurt in the mines and A lot of times they were just being overprescribed. We suddenly started having a lot of, tell you what, Dave, you want to go ahead and start that. We were, and just let it roll. We were having a lot of overdose death. We started having a lot of drug-related crime, similar to what you would hear about in an inner city. If you listen to people from the inner city talk about how life changed when crack and heroin came into communities, similar. Nobody was safe. Families stealing from families. People ended up overdosing and dead, and just that would never have happened before. I remember a lady telling me, we were doing some community forums about it. She said, you know, with these drunks, we've always had drunks, and you find a drunk in the ditch, you just set him on his feet and point him towards home. But these pill heads, it's like you look them in the eye and you don't see nobody home but the craving. And so people didn't know what to do. So I had been working in the arts, but I had worked at an organization called Apple Shop, which is a documentary arts center across in the next county over from Harlan in Letcher County. And so they helped me, and we wrote a grant to use the arts to help our community respond to what was essentially a cultural crisis. That we didn't really have a way with what we had to that. Our old tools were being together and weren't working to respond to that. And so what we ended up doing was we did a big survey. I teach Appalachian Studies, which is, I say this when I'm in other places, but every student should have some way to study the place they come from or the place that they are. The idea of place-connected education, I think, is very important. And there's so many forces in our society that uproot us from place, that make us want to not care about place, that make us just want to float freely through the world. And I think that one of the reasons I like living in the mountains is there is such a thing as Appalachian Studies. So we got out and we just started talking to people about, well, how could we use the arts to respond to this thing that's going on? And so some of that's what's popping up here. And so we did three things. This was in 2003. We did a massive community photography project. So it was funny. It was like one of the last. We bought all these disposable cameras and handed them out in churches and boys and girls clubs and in different classes we did. It was one of the last things that I think people ever did on film, right? I mean, y'all look like most of y'all remember what film is. Now everybody's got a camera in their pocket, but back then you had to give people a camera. And so we did a big visual census of our community. And then the other thing that people talked about was back in the day, that back when there were lots of schools in the communities, that a couple of people said that every Friday, every kid would have to get up and do something. It didn't matter, whatever it was. You could sing a song or tell a story or whatever. But there was this idea that you had something to offer that you could do from a stage. And so we started talking about, well, we'll do some kind of story-based theater that would incorporate music, because we're very musical people. And then we decided to do a public art program where we were making tile mosaics, because we had a clay program at our school. But the idea was that whatever we did, we wouldn't hire a bunch of artists. We would go out and we would get enough artists who could show people how to do things they didn't know how to do. And what we wanted to do was create as many opportunities as possible for people to sit around together. Because, I guess this is here too, but, we had a lot of our cultural traditions created opportunities for people just to talk to each other, right? Like, the classic, of course, in our culture is quilting. Women would get together mostly and would sew together. And, of course, that's how people figured things out together, right? I think the same thing happens with all kinds of different activities if you think of culture broadly. And so, but our thing was we wanted to figure out how to get people talking to each other about what was going on in a way that wasn't just, so many of the forums and communities, I don't know how it is out here, but almost every public forum has some adversarial element to it, right? Ball game. you're on one side or the other, even if you're friends. Every public meeting, if there's an official present, you got to be on one side or the other. And so we were like, how do we multiply the opportunities for people just to be together in non-adversarial ways? So we ended up getting this grant. We had, and what the thing that kind of took off the most was, we did work with a playwright, a woman named Jo Carson, who's since passed. And we did all these oral histories, not just about what was going on wrong, but what did we have to celebrate. And she ended up writing a play with us. She wrote it, and we rewrote it, and she wrote it, and we rewrote it some more, but it was called Higher Ground. And what she did was, I don't know about floods here, but where we live, where there's so little flat land, when water rises, it rises fast. Next thing you know, you're covered up. And so we had lots of floods in our history. And so one of the things that happens in floods is that people kind of put aside what part of the county you're from, or whether you're black or white, or whether you're rich or poor. If you're down in the mud, they pull you out of the mud, set you back on your feet. And so Joe made that the metaphor for what we should think about in terms of dealing with these pills. There was a flood of medicine. So we did this play. And we had about 80 people in it. And it was a musical. It was an OxyContin musical. And I hated theater. When I was in second grade, my teacher, Miss Jean Lawhorn, she had us all dress up like little country kids and made us go around and sing to all the other classes sing that song, Old Dan Tucker came too late to eat his supper. Supper's over, breakfast cooking, Old Dan Tucker just stood there looking. Y'all know that one? I ain't gonna sing it for you. But apparently I was the only kid in second grade that could remember all the verses. Because I don't even remember this, my mother told me about it. And one day I was singing it for the 6th grade and I bent over to tie my boot. I had to wear a coonskin hat too. I had to wear an adult extra large. I've always had a massive head. And I got a paddling over that. I was like, the heck with theater, I ain't gonna be in no more. Oh, and then I had to sing a song. I was in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I had to be the woodsman and sing a solo called I'm a Terrible, 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 Terrible Man. I'm just a boy. So I didn't want to be in theater no more, but we did this play, and I'll never forget this. We have a lot of doctors that come from the Middle East. They're paying their medical bill or medical school bill. We get a lot of doctors surveyed, and so they didn't grow up in the community. And we got one. We got a lot of good ones, but we got one that was kind of trouble. He was overprescribing his medicine. Got arrested for it, got put in jail eventually. But we had a scene in this thing where a doctor, he was actually a doctor, he was a Filipino man, he'd been there for a long, long time. And he sat on stage and he flung his prescriptions up into the air, willy-nilly, indiscriminately prescribing his medicine. And then the rest of us had to stomp around like zombies. And we passed money bags up to him. And we sang this song called Pain. I got a pain, I got a pain, I got a pain in my neck. I got a pain, I got a pain, I got a pain in my arm. And, it's like, when they put that in, I was like, because we had hired professional directors with our grant money, I was like, this is crazy, I ain't doing this. And, but I was like, there were 80 people there in that play, and none of them, this was the thing, none of them really liked theater either. It was like they came because we were in so much pain. It was so acute. And when we did that number the first night, the first day we did it, we had about a half full house. And I remember the hair running up the back of my neck because I heard people saying in the crowd, saying the name of that doctor. And then the rest of our shows were packed out. And by the end of it, the politicians were coming. That's when I knew that we must have started something. Because by the end, the judges and the county officials were coming because they were shaking everybody's, that we had done something that had given people something that they wanted to be at. People were coming, because the other thing that happens is like nobody wants to ever come back to a place like ours. And people were getting their kinfolks coming in from Corbin and London and wherever, Lexington, and they were coming back to see this thing. And the thing was, as soon as it was over, all the people in it I was so happy it was over, I can't even tell you. And they wanted to do it again. So the next place, so then we've done 5 now, and it's still going. And so I was thinking about this. See, we just got us one of them Republican governors in Kentucky. We've had us a Democrat. We were the poster child for how good Obamacare could work. We had like hundreds of thousands of people that didn't have no health insurance have it now. Then this cat got elected just the other day, and so I was thinking about it because I ain't gonna tell you how I voted because I doubt it's a mystery to you. But I was thinking about it that I didn't even think about it. I didn't look to see who was who or what was what or what they were saying in the paper because we've gotten so in our trenches as a people about how we vote, right? I remember my dad, I always told him he was a Democrat, but he insisted he was a Republican. And but he was always for the little man. He thought everybody should work hard and everybody should have a fair chance, but he was still a Republican. And so, but I remember he'd always try to figure out which person was the best person that was running. And I just hate that we've got like that we don't do that no more. You just got to go with your party. Because if they don't win, the other one's going to run roughshod over them. And I was thinking about this, actually, there's a book, and I don't know if the story's true, but I'm going to tell it anyway, that in Tennessee, up above Nashville, in the Cumberland Plateau, there's a bunch of counties. It's very beautiful. It's kind of softly mountain. It's a lot less rugged than where I live now. But that's where the legislator came from that sponsored the monkey law. I bet y'all have heard of the Scopes monkey trial. It was in Inherit the Wind, where there was a school teacher got in trouble down in southeast Tennessee for teaching Darwin's theory of evolution back in the 20s. And so this woman, scholar, I think she's actually at the University of Kentucky, she went back. She was from this upper Cumberland area, not where the trial was, but where the legislator come from. And so what she got to finding out is that before the railroad came up in the mountains, people didn't row crop so much, right? They did this mixed agriculture. That most of what, before the railroad, whatever you grew mostly got consumed within the community or within the sub-region anyway, right? And they said that when and the other thing that was happening before that came was that people would debate the Bible. That there was 100 different flavors of Christianity, and people would get together and talk about it. And they'd argue whether this was true or that was true. And it was public. And it was open. And what they said happened, what this woman said happened, was that after the train come in, and they started row cropping and monoculturing, that everything changed. That they weren't interdependent on each other. And that suddenly the problems in the school books changed. This is fascinating to me. She had made a study of it. That the word problems in the school books changed from being about if Farmer Fred raises so much of this and so much of that and has so much of this in one field to how many plants can Farmer Fred get in 1 acre if he plants so-and-so so far apart. The textbooks got monoculture. And people felt it. And they felt their culture changing as his agriculture changed. And so what she charts is how their religion got simpler. That they stopped debating. There was like everything, they had to like circle the wagons. And they stopped disagreeing about these things and debating it. And that this is the time period that the song "Give Me That Old Time Religion" got written. Came out of that play. You know, this idea that it was simple. And it became more reduced. And the thing about that, I mean, you know, whatever. It's like, I don't know whether y'all are like, well, good, that's good, or bad. I don't know what y'all think. But here's the thing I think is a loss. Is that idea that people can talk to each other about things. That we could get together and debate it like a community. And I do think that's the loss. And so one of the things that, I don't know where I'm at on this slideshow now. So one of the things that we learned is that this theater project could become a powerful other way for us to start a conversation in our community. And so the second play, we looked at personal responsibility in drug addiction, right? We used the metaphor of the prodigal son. We said we had a prodigal daughter who was a pillhead, went away to rehab, or no, didn't go to rehab, just was loose on the community, and the mother brings her back in, and she burns the house down, right? And the good daughter is, I mean, you know, most of us who grew up hearing the story of the prodigal son, you're like, that was a tough one, right? It's like the good kid doesn't seem to get what the bad kid gets. It was always hard as a kid to deal with that story, right? And so we dealt with that in the play in the context of drugs. In that play, we also looked at the heroism of minors and the fun of minors, right? Because you know, minors, we had a bunch of mine disasters in the community around that time. We had several people die in the mines, and so we did stories about that. But we also did miners prank real hard, right? Like they'll put axle grease in each other's shampoo bottles, and we had a story of guys putting a snake. They were old football rivals, and one of them put a cow pie in his lunch bucket, and the other one put a live snake. And when they did that, the other miners taped them up, lip to lip, and laid them in the middle of the aisle in the I forget what they call the passage, but the passage inside the mine. And nobody was allowed to cut them apart either, because they had to kiss and make up. Right? Because you can't, I mean, you know, the whole idea was, it was funny, but it was also about, there was all this tested, because the work was so dangerous, and these men had to test each other. And they had to know who they could trust. But we did that because we knew that in the third play, we were going to talk about land use. We were going to talk about strip murder. And that was the first time we were real divided within our cast. Because that's, you know, that's people's money. You're talking about people's money. And so what we did was we kept softening it up because we didn't want to lose cast members. Because one of my best friends had an environmental testing business. You know, when you do coal mining, you get a permit. And for every coal mine, you get a permit. And before you mine, you have to test the water quality. And after you finish, you got to test. You got to do pre and post tests on the water to gauge your environmental impact. And so that was his business. So he completely depended on getting mine contracts. So he said, "Man, I don't mind if y'all do this, but I'm just going to have to drop out if you do." So we tinkered with the script and had this great community conversation about, well, what do we say? Because one of the things we do is whatever people talk about, you can always have another character talking about the other side, right? Because our interest is in people talking about things, not in telling people what to think. But so what we ended up doing is that third play was about the wages of not talking about things. So we had these young people who were wanting to leave the community, and but one of them wanted to stay and one of them wanted to leave, and they couldn't get anybody to talk to them about the land or leaving and staying. Everybody was either trying to push them out or get them to stay. Nobody wanted to reason with them. So it was all about what are the wages of not talking to young people about the difficult things. And that set us off on doing a couple plays about really looking at what has to happen for us to hold our young people. And so this last one we did this past spring was about the idea of turning the page economically. Because most of y'all know that after around 2012, 2013, the bottom really fell out of the coal edge. And what had been a rough time has turned into a disaster area. People are realizing it's not coming back. So we're trying to figure out what to do next. And I guess what I would leave you with, because that seems like plenty, there's a bunch of other stuff to talk about, but it's been quite a day. I guess what I would leave y'all with is that it's been really nice to know that there's 50, 60, 70 people in our community that have seen the value of talking to each other. And we come from across the spectrum. We've got Christians, and we got heathens, we got heterosexuals, and gay people, and people in between, and and it's really who we are. And I think that if I could preach on anything, that's what it would be. It's like we can talk with our young people about things, we can say things with each other, and really the sky doesn't fall. And I think that in some ways the sky's falling anyway. And that we don't know what our way out is, but that's what we're trying to figure out is how do we work together to hold the sky up. So I appreciate y'all bringing me out here and making fun of my accent. And I'd be glad to come again, and y'all, we'd love to have y'all come all together. You just come all together, get your big old bus, get on your bus tomorrow, and when you get done going to look at all the farms, you can just come on and see us. We'd be glad to have you. But Donna, I thank you for having me. I appreciate everybody on the staff for being so nice, and I hope y'all have a good time for the rest of your time here. Thank you.